It now seems, because one of the prisoners has returned himself to prison, that our justice system is dependent upon the honesty of our crooks.
Hello, I just wanted to know, how hard can it be to keep the correct prisoners in prison?
Well, I can't think what you're referring to, Lynn. So, 2 prisoners released accidentally from Wandsworth prison in the last week. I mean, there have been others, as we know. Even though the Justice Secretary, David Lammy, said he'd introduce the strongest checks ever to prevent such a thing. Anna?
I completely agree. I cannot understand how this is able to happen. It's been absolutely shocking. The first incident that really came to light a few weeks ago was shocking enough, but to now hear not only are there other incidents, but this is something that is happening and has been happening for many years, almost on a monthly basis. This is not how we expect our criminal justice system to run. We want to feel safe and secure in our communities. So I'm really astounded that this has just been almost accepted as a sort of state of natural disorder, and it's not acceptable. I'm really glad that David Lammy is...
You say it's been accepted. Is anyone here accepting it?
Within the system, it seems to be that this is just how things run, with this sort of chaos, and it's shocking. So for me, I can't understand in this day and age why we're still having people carrying huge boxes of paperwork around, how things can get lost. I don't understand why there aren't second and third checks. So I know that the Justice Secretary has called all the prison officers in to discuss it with him this week, but I think we need an urgent review of this. I know he's undertaking that, but we cannot allow this to go on, and I'm not going to sit here and point at other parties, because this has been going on for some time. We have to take responsibility for it now. We have to invest in our prisons, our justice system, and David Lammy is absolutely determined to do that.
Well, listen, you mentioned David Lammy. Just clear up one thing for me, because after... I mean, this kind of came to... This has been happening for years, as you say, but it came to prominence with a man called Hadush Kabati, who was accidentally released. David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, said he had introduced stronger checks before inmates were released, and he said they would be effective immediately on the 27th of October. 2 days later, the 29th of October, when Sharif was released accidentally, David Lammy said... He said only the other day, actually, those checks were not in place. Now, both those things cannot be true. Were they in place, as he said, on the 27th of October, or were they actually not in place by the 29th of October?
He's obviously called for them to be in place by the 27th of October, and the fact
no,
that
he said they were in place.
Well,
Those two things cannot both be true.
So they obviously weren't in place because something's happened. But
even though he said they were, and the Minister of Justice put out a statement saying they were.
But so he's called for that to happen, and it's clearly not happened. So something is going fundamentally wrong in the system.
He didn't call for it to happen. In fairness, he said it was happening.
OK, well, he obviously, as Secretary of State, so often, I'm sure you put out saying this is going to happen from now onwards. And there's obviously such an issue with our system, the chaos that it's in. This cannot continue. And I think this is, for me, I look at this feels like another rock that we've lifted up, and there's just such a mess underneath that we've got to sort out. I feel like our public services have been eroded over so many years that they're in a state of chaos. And there are lots of good people working within that system, but they're just not able to do it because they're overstretched. They're absolutely pushed to rack and ruin, and now they're struggling to really get a grip of the system, and we haven't put the infrastructure in place to support them.
Graham?
I thought we were going to the audience. If one person is released from prison who shouldn't be by accident, that's unacceptable, isn't it? And the truth is, Anna's quite right about that. The number released in the first year since Labour came to power, and this is an interesting thing to investigate, is more than the previous 3 years. So something has gone badly wrong since Labour and now David Lammy are in charge. And of course, he came to the House of Commons. He was asked 5 times to be open about it. And we thought maybe he didn't know. Turned out he'd been told the night before. He then claimed in PMQs that he was out buying a suit in the morning. So he'd been told that people had been let out. He then said he was buying a suit. Apparently that story has changed as well. They really are, I think, the most dishonest government I've ever come across. And you may think that we set a bar there at times. And I'd understand that. But it's day after day, isn't it? I mean,
but hang on, let's talk about your record, Graham. Graham, let's talk about your record. I mean, at best, when the Conservatives were power, there was 1 accidental prisoner released a week. When it was at its worst, it was 2 a week. And 7,000 prisoners' officers left the service.
Every single one of those is unacceptable, Fiona. And that's what I said, every single one. More than 3 years' worth in 1 year since Labour came to power. So it's not this idea which Anna tried to peddle that somehow we've got these broken public services and they're going to fix the foundations. And that story, we've heard so much of that. The truth is, everything has got worse. more people released in error in 1 year than in the previous 3 years, even though anyone being released accidentally is unacceptable. And then we have a Secretary of State, no less than a Deputy Prime Minister, in the House of Commons answering to the people and refusing to answer the question, even though in the file in front of him he actually had the details. We've got a government which promised to be more transparent, to be more open, to set higher standards than they'd seen under the Conservatives, and they've done the exact opposite. And they're resigning week after week. And we're barely going to even mention today that the Chancellor of the Exchequer committed a criminal offence in collecting rent for a year without getting a licence. A licence which she first of all said, a bit like David Lammy, she didn't know about. She and her husband didn't know they had to have one. Then it turned out that 2 agents, not one, had told them they did.
Hang on.
They collected rent for a year, and she didn't resign either.
We've
the whole thing is a mess.
Off topic.
It's about trust.
The estate agent in the case of Rachel Reeves basically said it was our fault. We said we'd do it on her behalf, and we didn't. That's what emerged.
The law, Fiona, if you want to set, if that's your role is to play setting out the objective truth, the law is that it is the responsibility of the landlord. Landlords lose their houses and their livelihoods because they have that personal responsibility. How is it that anyone in this audience would be prosecuted for a crime, but if you're the Chancellor of the Exchequer, apparently even you at the BBC are saying, oh no, it was someone else's fault, they just broke a rule. It wasn't the rule,
Graham
it was a law.
Stuart, even we at the BBC are saying that. The estate agent. These are not my words, they're the words of the estate agent question. Please
the estate agent isn't a lawyer.
Please do not put those words into my mouth.
We all heard,
you know
we all heard what you
know,
said, Fiona.
Yeah, I'm quoting the estate agent. The man at the back in the white shirt.
My concern is if David Lammy is the Deputy Prime Minister and he gives his word that something's in place, and it clearly wasn't, then as a Labour voter myself, and I hate to say this, then I can't trust what you tell me. I should have the categorical assurance of you're telling me from that position of power that that's in place, and clearly it wasn't, then why should I trust you?
I know you want to come back now. I was going to tell you. There's a man at the back. I can see the arm, but I can't see who it's attached to. Yes, you with the glasses, I think.
Yeah, it's all fair, fine and well, playing the sort of whataboutism game about Labour's figures being higher in terms of releases than the Conservatives. But if one is too many, then why in 15 years did more than one ever happen?
Yeah. How?
Man here in the front.
I watched the news today and the levels of sickness within the prison service are skyrocketing. That needs seriously readdressing. And why it's happening, we do not know. And when new employment right comes in, where you can claim sickness from day one in the job, it is going to be Murray hell, may I say.
So at Wandsworth, where these two prisoners were released accidentally, something like a third of prison staff are not available for work on any given day because of sickness or because of training. Paul?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's just say ministers obviously do have to take responsibility. I find it very difficult, Graham, to sit there, you with a straight face, and talk about neglect of public services when you consider the track record of your government, the government you were a member of for 14 years, because it doesn't matter every single aspect of our public realm, but in particular our criminal justice system, in our courts, our probation services, where we've got 25% staff vacancies, in our prisons. Let's remember our prisons are at 99% capacity. The staff every single day face the threat of violent assaults, harassment from prisoners. They are at breaking point. That partly explains the issues around staff absences. I've been in prisons with prison staff and prison officers. I can tell you it's quite a difficult environment to work in. There are obviously individual mistakes, and those mistakes need to be rectified. But this is it's a systemic failure, and it represents 14 years of neglect.
Why is it 3 times more now than it was when the Conservatives left power, Paul? If your point was valid, Graham, why has it tripled?
Graham,
why is it tripled?
If we can finish the point. When you cut criminal justice funding by 22%, it's going to have an impact somewhere. Now, it's absolutely right, as I said, right at the outset, that government ministers take responsibility. But I don't think anyone should take lectures from a government that presided over a decade and a half of austerity, Graham, about the state of our prisons or any other public service.
And just quickly, why has it gone up? Because it has spiked under the new government?
There's a range of reasons. Partly it's the pressures that those staff are under. Also remember, under Graham's government, the government increased the pension age for prison officers to 68. I don't know how many members of this audience would fancy being on a ward with dozens of young men, many of them violent offenders, at the age of 67, 68. It's a difficult and at times dangerous job. Staff are assaulted every single day. That partly explains why sickness levels are high.
Tim?
I just don't get it. The one point of prison is to keep people inside it. So how do you end up shuttling people out of it? And in the case of Kibatu, the Ethiopian gentleman, he actually said to them, I don't think I'm supposed to go. And they insisted he leave and gave him £76 as pocket money. Now, when this sort of thing goes on, I hope someone gets sacked, because a Wally is involved here. It might be a minister, it might be someone junior. But I don't like the idea that this sort of outrageous thing might occur and no one takes any responsibility for it. Especially as it now seems, because one of the prisoners has returned himself to prison, that our justice system is dependent upon the honesty of our crooks in order to keep people inside. Right? Now, we can have the soap opera, as we've just had, of your government did this, your government did that. The truth is it is a systemic failure. It's an institutional failure. It's a consequence in part of austerity. It's a consequence of a population which has said, we want everyone to be locked up, but weren't willing to pay the taxes to build the prisons to put people in them. It's a consequence of an approach towards prisons which has emphasised privatisation and the hiring of private security firms. And very often people are running prisons who are not suitable to do it. It used to be, in the good old days, during the war, people would go from the military to working in prisons. Kind of tough old lags would staff them. Quite clearly, people are now overwhelmed. Just look at the number of scandals of people having sex with prisoners. I mean, that's another pretty good indicator that something's going wrong. Our prison system is a strange mix of very, very cruel, locking people up for long periods of time, giving them nothing to do, young men who have no hope, who are not being retrained, at some point will be released into the community where they know nothing but crime. On the one hand, it's cruel. On the other hand, it is clearly too liberal and too lax. Let's sack a couple of people, but let's also have a discussion about how to fix a systemic problem.
Are you talking in government or are you talking in prisons?
I mean the people who let them out. And like there was an MP in Parliament who said, I hope no one person is used as a scapegoat for this. No, I hope they are. And this is part of the problem. There is no sense of responsibility in so much of our culture nowadays. So, this is the original question. This was the original question. How did it happen? Someone screwed up. Someone must go. And we want reassurance that this isn't just covered up and people aren't just moved on, but someone pays the price for this decision.
OK.
I know you're a trade unionist, you won't like that.
But I think the point is, Tim, what you don't want is a scapegoat. What you want to do is go through a proper process and find out what was the mistake that lay behind those people being released. I agree with you entirely about what is the point of prison. 80% of offences are carried out by people re-offending. Clearly our prison system isn't working, and it's not helped by the fact that we've got 25% vacancies amongst probation officers as well. The people who should be helping people rehabilitating the community just aren't there and aren't available to do the job.